Hi there. It is me, author Jared Garrett, who also publishes books under the name author Jerry Ironspear. But we're going to not even talk about any of that really today. We're going to talk about aspirational stories that aren't always written with the intent of being aspirational. Talk about wholesomeness. We're going to talk about different paradigms. It's going to be as brief as I can, but I will rant and I will ramble. There's an article being circulated amongst writer and reader Twitter and other social media in which I guess a staff writer at Wired magazine, it's an online mag, spent some time with Brandon Sanderson, one of the biggest writers in the world and very easily, almost for sure, the biggest fantasy writer in the world. He has the biggest Kickstarter of all time, which made $42 million. $200 of that was from my family, by the way. Anyway, so in this article, this feller talks about some time he spent with Brandon, and how he spent the whole time looking for a story, and he just couldn't really find a story. And he rags on Brandon. He rags on his writing. I might need to rant on that right now. I'm going to rant about that right now. He rags on Brandon's writing. He says Brandon's writing isn't all that special. His prose isn't great. He then uses things like "she felt herself fall" or something like that. Yeah, that's not the best prose. You don't have to have beautiful lyrical prose to tell a kick-ass story. You just don't. In fact, sometimes beautiful lyrical prose can be very pleasing, but it can become purple prose when you're trying to just tell a dadgum story. If you're seeing the prose instead of reading the story, and the author's goal was to get you to read the story and get involved and get deep into the perspective of those characters, that prose needs to become more transparent, invisible. It needs to basically become invisible. So who cares about the prose? He's telling kick-ass stories that make us cheer and jump for joy and cry sometimes. He's a good storyteller, man. There are a lot of people who get fully hung up on their word choice over and over again and wordsmithing their prose, and that's fine. If that's your style, if that's your approach, and that's how you want to write, that's just fine. I don't have a problem with it. But saying that other people have to do that, and saying and kind of judging people who don't read that stuff because they just want to read a kick-ass story, that's not cool, man. So that's my rant about that. But this writer at Wired is not the only person who gets into that. I'll tell you what, man. Nah. So back to this thing. So the guy spends all this time and he talks about how he cries in Brandon's personal theater. I don't understand. It's weird. It's kind of a rambly article that didn't really get anywhere. But ultimately, he ended up bashing on Brandon, his readers, also fantasy readers, and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which a lot of people still use for shorthand, Mormons. The writer of this article, it's like he didn't know that the word wholesome exists in the English lexicon. I do not want to be nasty, especially because, boy, I tell you what, Brandon's response on Reddit is just marvelously crafted. And it just goes to show just how important it is to him to tell the exact story that he's trying to tell. I bet he was thoughtful and careful about that, but also he's been being thoughtful and careful about the way he writes and talks for so long. It's probably almost second nature for him to get it right. It's even-handed. It tells people to not attack. It's beautiful. If you read it with an open heart, you see that he's an authentic guy who's just trying to make the world a better place. And that's where I get to this, the crux of what I want to talk about here for the rest of this video. This writer over there doesn't know that wholesome exists or something. It's like everything needs to have a dark underbelly or a dark past. There needs to be hedonism or nihilism or something like that. Well, guess what, my dude? A lot of us don't like that crap. A lot of us, we want to see evil portrayed. And we want to see good portrayed. And we want to see it portrayed accurately and with care and with depth. And we want good to win because we want the good people to be stronger than the bad people because they're seeking their best side. They're seeking to become the better version of themselves, not the most powerful version of themselves, not the most ruling the most land version of themselves, not, whatever, the most murderous person. They're trying to become the very best person they can, developing their very best skills and abilities and powers in some cases. And by doing that and having indomitable will overcoming the bad guys and overcoming the bad things. We can't conquer necessarily the bad stuff that's in us, but we want to see people overcome it regularly, over and over again. We want to see people become their best selves. Brandon writes aspirational stories. It's probably not his intent, but partly it is his intent because he does want to build great worlds and he wants to build great characters and great stories. And not all, you know, not all of the greats that exist in the world are aspirational, but a frick ton of them are. And I'm not saying the greats, like the great classics necessarily, because let me tell you something. The Great Gatsby is an astonishingly well-written book, but it's really gross. And as a piece of art, it is very impressive, but it's art I don't like. I found it fascinating observationally, but I did not find it something I could get into and really enjoy, except for on an observational, now that's interesting how he's done this. Nah, man, we can differ in our opinions, but that's just not for me, for something that just, that bakes my cookies or bakes my cake or rubs my tummy or whatever the frick you want to say. Brandon's writing aspirational stuff. He's writing stories that are broad and huge and wide ranging and characters that people can see themselves in and also see how they want to be in. They don't have to just see, their physical characteristics or their traits or anything like that. They can also see, I want to be like her. I want to be like him, like Kaladin or Sintra, the beautiful, wonderful character in Skyward. She's a great character, and I forgot her name. Sintra? Tell me. I forgot. Anyway, in the Reckoners and all those great characters, Elantris and Vin and in the Mistborn series, we see ourselves in those characters, but we also see ourselves how we'd like to be, the way we'd like to handle those difficult situations that challenge us, that knock us down, that bloody our nose, that bloody our everything. We need that. We don't need hedonism. We don't need more of this stuff. We don't need more bacchanalia that's out there. We don't need to see movies like Babylon. It was Babylon, wasn't it? Ugh, it just turned me right off, the whole thing. And my wife and I went and saw Don't Worry, Darling. Again, observationally, from an observational kind of just passing through perspective, very impressive piece of work. Extraordinary acting, great, interesting concept, fantastic cinematography, and set pieces, and utterly just bleh, right? Just kind of, you don't have to agree with me on this, but that's how I felt about it. I was like, why did I watch this? None of these people are very interesting at all. They're all dull, and some of them are terrible, and a lot of them are terrible, and they don't get theirs. Some of them do, but not all of them. And it's full of so many holes, character motivation-wise and world-wise. It's just like, this is just good. It's like all they wanted to do was show this bacchanalia that they involve themselves in. But the big thing, and I'm getting too specific there, is that we need more wholesome stories. We need more aspirational stories where people can see themselves in the characters and see how they want to be and see how they can and believe that they can overcome, and discard and dismiss this damaging idea of, I'm never changing who I am. Don't change who you are. You can't really do that. I am this. But I want to change aspects of me to become a better version of me, right? That is what life's about, becoming our very best selves. And books that help us see that and help lift us that way are needed. So, Mr. Person over at Wired, that article you wrote, thanks for giving me an opportunity to rant. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Go find you a book that lifts you, that puts you through the ringer, that captures you and squeezes you and twists you, like I already said with the ringer. We need those books. On a final note, a personal note, when I was younger, in the stupid cult that I grew up in, books like that saved my life. I'm going to go ahead and put the logic for you, okay? I was utterly neglected, abused, nowhere I could turn, nobody I could trust. I felt like I could sort of trust some of the kids I was growing up with on a level or two, but nowhere else that I could go. There was nowhere I could go for something safe, for something that I could predict and feel like was making me stronger and could help me be better and understand the world. So I turned to books, and I read fantasy and science fiction and modern and contemporary fiction and all this stuff. Books like Bridge of Terabithia and like The Lord of the Rings and R.A. Salvatore's Icewind Dale trilogy and all the Drizzt stories and so many more. And I found a way to tell a story for myself, a way to just narrate my own dadgum story. I found like that I could read my story and write it at the same time. Books saved me from the dark, deep despair and depression and nihilism that I was leaning towards, because that's what happens when you go through what I went through growing up. Books saved me. Comic books also saved me. But if I'd only stuck to comic books, I wouldn't have such a bright, robust appreciation of what's out there in the world. But stories like Peter Parker's story about these unexpected powers and these unexpected villains and these unexpected things that happen to him in his life, and how he's just trying to get through and do his best and become better, those saved my life. There is value in giving and creating and producing uplifting, wholesome stuff. Wholesome stuff. Whether you do squeaky clean, whether you do just on the edge of clean, whatever. Wholesome stuff that doesn't drag us through the dark, the dismal, the mud, the murk, that shows us evil for sure in all of its terribleness, but it doesn't drag us through it. There's a way to do that. Read my Guide and Sword series, Laconai and Usurper and Red Prince. I did that. It was an effort. It took a lot of effort for me to rewrite and rewrite and write, so it was doing that in the right way. But I'm happy with the way it did it. So there you go. We need more wholesome books. I need more wholesome books. Everybody does. This world that is increasingly noisy and increasingly lost and desperate for meaning needs more uplifting, wholesome stuff. So my friend, you are insulting Brandon, but ultimately you are showing your own gaps and your own ultimately possibly futile or so far not fruitful search for meaning. Read some of Brandon's books, and you might find the magic that we see in Brandon's books. And then read other books, and you'll find the magic, uplifting, inspiring magic that saved my life. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.